Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Perpetual Chess. We have a return guest that I'm excited to chat with. He was a World Youth Champion, World Open Champion, U.S. Champion. He's a trainer, friend of the podcast, and he actually just recently not only competed in the World Rapid and Blitz, but he made some noise in both events. In the World Rapid, he started 3-0, beating Abdusattorov on the way. He lost to a certain Merzin, as we will discuss, who went on to become the sensation of the tournament. He tailed off in the Rapid, but then in the Blitz, our guest ended up finishing shared 14th place, beating Shanklin, Lequang Liem. He's also moved to New York when he was 4 years old, so got to play this tournament in his very backyard. So I'm really excited to, of course, the drama will probably eventually come up in conversation, but mainly I'm excited to talk about the chess and excited to welcome back to the program Grandmaster Alex Lenderman. Welcome, Alex.
Good morning, Ben, and thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, excited to discuss this tournament. So we're recording on Wednesday, January 8th in the morning, as Alex alluded to, and this should be out the following week. Now, Alex, so I played through all your games, by the way, and they ended up a lot of fascinating moments. So for listeners, I actually made a LiChess study of all of Alex's games from the Rapid and the Blitz, and I will share that for anyone who wants to check it out. Just put it in the show notes. But some truly fascinating moments, both in what did happen, some good swindles, some devastating blunders, both in your favor and against you. But before we get to all that, Alex, when did you decide you were going to play in this tournament?
Well, when I heard that it was announced that it was going to be in New York and it was official, then I decided that I want to make sure I play. I wasn't sure if I was going to qualify because I heard that you need a 25 rating for it, and lately I've been in such a slump that I've even dropped below 2500 in classical. But thankfully as long as you have 2515, at least one of the three categories, rapid, blitz, or classical, then you're able to play. So I didn't have to rely on wildcards or anything like that. So once I was granted permission to play, I decided, okay, I'm gonna make sure I play this year, because I figured I've never played this tournament before, World Rapid and Blitz, and there's probably not going to be a lot of chances to play it again, realistically, because I usually do camps. I teach a lot these days, especially during this time of the years. Unless it's local, it's just going to be too inconvenient for me, let alone cost an arm and leg and a kidney. So if there's ever going to be a chance to play, it's going to be this year. So I made sure to make it work for my schedule to play this year.
Yeah, a huge leg up being able to play in your backyard and not pay $350 a night for a hotel and travel costs and everything else. And Alex, I noticed you've been playing a lot of OTB this year. Is that just par for the course, or was part of that because you knew you would be playing this marquee event?
Oh, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I actually thought that I haven't been playing a lot of
Really?
lately. I think if you look at my tournament history, I think with every year lately, not counting 2020, which was obviously a COVID year. Other than that, like 2019, I played a ton, right? And before 2019, pre-COVID year, I played a ton of over the board every year. 2022, I still played a fair amount, and then I started to taper off. 2023, I think I played less, and 2024, I think I played even less, and I don't even think I've played very much since the fall of 2024. So, but okay, I'm still maintaining a somewhat fairly active schedule, but I just decided to focus much more on my teaching. But I did play a couple of warm-up rapid events right before the World Rapid and Blitz, since I knew I will play, so I wanted to at least get some practice in, so I'm not completely rusty, perhaps.
Yeah, and just an incredible showing. I mean, obviously you're quite accomplished, but still, I mean, outperformed your rating and even won a little bit of money in the World Blitz. And I noticed, so in playing through your games, I noticed that you stuck to your repertoire for the most part. A lot of Frenches, a lot of sort of D4 complex when you were white. Was that just, you're definitely just going to, like when I talked to Eric Rosen and Alyssa Malakina before the tournament, they both said that this tournament in particular, because there's no time to prepare, there's limited value in like preparing like a more diverse repertoire. Was that your philosophy as well?
Yeah, for sure. I tried to sort of like play training games ahead of time and try to already decide ahead of time what will be my opening repertoire for white and black, like my main repertoire. Now, okay, maybe for a specific game or two when people did get a chance to prepare, I might have deviated a little bit from my repertoire, like the first game, let's say, of each day in Rapid, especially. But for the most part, I tried to stick to my repertoire, especially after I lost round 5 in a Blitz portion where I played kind of a good opening, but I did not have a good feel for the position, and my opponent was playing quickly. I was taking my time, and eventually I lost to a lower rated player. He was a good Blitz player, but still I lost a pretty bad game. And then since that game, I decided, okay, I'm not experimenting anymore at all. I'm just playing completely my stuff. If I don't get much, so be it, but at least I have a good feel for it, and that seemed to work very well for the rest of the tournament, the Blitz event, because I was getting good opening positions and I was getting good fights, and things worked out well for me in the end.
Yeah, I noticed that you seem to always come out okay of the opening, with maybe one or two exceptions, but definitely seemed to work, as you said, worked out well for you. And we have a couple listener questions. These two are related or similar, so I'll just go ahead and read them both. The first is from Muskie Books, who I know you know.
Mm-hmm.
And he mentioned that you pulled off some major upsets in this event and in the past. He wondered if you consciously change your style to increase the chance of this, or do you think it's more due to the way your opponents tend to approach you? And a similar question here from Roy Lopes, who says, congrats on your recent results in the World Rapid and Blitz. Could you elaborate on your mindset when facing higher rated opponents? Are there any lessons that could be translated to adult improvers?
Yeah, these are both excellent questions. I guess let's start with the tournament, with the approach. I think that in the opening, I wanted to play positions that I had a good feel for, especially in the Blitz, because there's not much time to think. So in the Blitz, the most important is to play openings you have the best feel for. And also, I was playing these openings Untitled Tuesday, a couple of days before, so I realized that it worked pretty well for me. I was actually playing at a very high level in Title Tuesday, especially the first one of the day, so I wanted to stick to that. Rapid, I did deviate a little bit here and there, but Blitz, I was trying to be more consistent into playing what I knew well. Now, as for my general approach, I would say the main thing was that I tried to play principal chess. I tried to play for a win, of course, right? Like against Abdusattorov, I made at some point, some bolder decisions, and I played principal chess. Because I think notoriously lately, because you mentioned the word adult improver. Well, lately I've been actually an adult decliner.
Yeah, well, a lot of us have.
If there's
Yeah,
a terminology for that, right? Like
right.
I've in the last 5 years, I've basically went from my peak, which is 2654 FIDE, to around 2480 FIDE, and so I lost in USCF. I lost over 200 points actually. So really declined quite a lot, especially the last couple of years. And obviously, when you have a long stretch of struggling, you start doubting yourself. You start wondering if you're even capable of playing chess at all anymore. And I was starting to wonder legitimately if maybe my level is not GM level anymore. Like maybe, especially in classical, if maybe I'm like closer to a 2400 level player, maybe even lower. Like I started to very seriously having such thoughts. And so honestly, like I was just hoping to at least perform at GM level in these tournaments. I just wanted to make sure I can actually still play chess, because I've heard of stories of people who actually just legitimately lost their ability of playing chess for whatever reason, like because like I even have a private student who's a young player. Well, he's not a private student anymore, but he lost over 100 points, and he was like a basically, it was going to be a foregone conclusion. He was going to be a GM. He was even over 2500, and now he's, I think, 2400 and not playing chess much anymore and lost motivation. And it's very hard to say. So, I mean, I think even with young players, and you could see something like that, like, and sometimes it's just hard to explain. For whatever reason, you just lose your ability to play. And I was actually legitimately wondering if that's the case with me, if maybe you just have a mental block. We see that in other sports, right, where people are young and then they just can't perform anymore for whatever reason. And so my goal was just to see if I can actually still play at GM level. So I had no pressure on myself. I was like, okay, if I can still play at GM level, at least I'm going to continue trying to train on chess, trying to keep going with chess. But if not, I guess this is going to be probably my last tournament, maybe, more or less. Because yeah, if I'm now a 2300 level player and I used to be 2650, like chess is not fun. I can't make a living off of it anymore. There's just no motivation to play at so much below my level. But it was a very big relief for me to still see that I can actually still play chess with with the right mindset. And once I did a little bit of training before the tournament and got rid of the rustiness and played the right type of positions that I had a feel for, I realized that okay, like at least I can take a little bit of a deep breath, that I could still perform, right? And if I do the right kind of training, that I'll be able to still perform at probably a decent level in classical as well. So there was no pressure. I just wanted to use this tournament a little bit like a test, honestly. And so when I played Abdusattorov, there was definitely no pressure. It was like a free roll game for me, right? Like I knew this was going to be an opportunity for me to do something special if things go well, right? Because in one game, really anything can happen. Anyone could beat anyone, more or less. And also I had a lot of fans backing me up. I teach a lot of kids, and a lot of my colleagues, coaches, parents, kids, there were just a lot of them were even in the fans watching live. I got text between games like of people who were supporting me even after the first two rounds that I won, and like it just gave me so much momentum, so much excitement that I just like used up all my energy to give it all I got. I knew that this is my opportunity to try to inspire a lot of people. And honestly, that's all I could have asked for, right? Is to inspire people and get them motivated to play chess, to train chess, to believe that anything is possible. Like, let's say a 1500 maybe who is scared to play an 1800 player, right? Like thinking they will lose. But now when they see that their coach led by example, they in a given game they can be the top player, right? Like that's really inspiring for them, right? To see that, yeah, actually, I'm not just speaking like, okay, you can beat them. I'm actually doing it, right? So it was very important for me. Like, so I used that as a motivation. I was like, I want to work hard and focus hard for them, right? To inspire them to, so that gave me that extra motivation as well. And to try to, first of all, prove to myself that I can still perform at GM level. And secondly, to show them that it's possible in one given game to do something special and play a great game. I was really happy to be able to honestly accomplish that. It was a big relief for me personally.
Yeah, amazing. So, I mean, to circle back to Roy Lope's question, I would say it's definitely a takeaway that to develop this mindset when you're playing someone higher rated, that it's a free roll in a sense. And if you're able to do that playing the likes of Abdusattorov, round 3 of the World Rapid with the world watching, as you say, we can definitely do it in our weekend or local tournaments. Now, I'm wondering though, Alex, like, so you start off well, you win your first couple games in the World Rapid, but obviously you're going to feel more eyeballs on you as you continue to have success. And this is something that would repeat later in the World Blitz. So this is similar to a recent conversation I had on the podcast where I was talking with Mark Heimann about playing Caruana with his recent fantastic results. It's one thing to tell yourself that the pressure's not on you, but do you feel added pressure as your good results start to stack on top of each other and like the bold names get bolder of who you're playing?
Well, I think Abdusattorov was probably the highest rated player I actually played in all of World Rapid, right? So actually, my next
right, but you played Hikaru in the Blitz, so
in the Blitz, yes. But first we're discussing Rapid, I guess, yes. So in the
yeah,
Rapid, actually, my next opponent was Volodar Murzin, who ended up, of
yeah,
course,
definitely want to get to that too.
yeah,
Yeah,
sensationally winning the tournament. But basically, actually, I think what happened. I don't think I started feeling pressure because if there's any game I felt pressure was Abdusattorov game, especially when I was winning. I was like, okay, like let's make sure we actually convert. Let's focus. Let's not
yeah,
because I knew he's extremely resourceful actually as a player. I know he's came back from a lot of very difficult positions, like the most famous example against Gukesh in the Olympiad 2022, when he sensationally turned around a lost position into a win in a classical game. So I knew he's a very resourceful fighter, so I needed to make sure I'm really focused and take advantage of my chances and don't let him get back in the game. I was very happy I was able to zone in. But honestly, I think what happened was with all the momentum I had for the first 3 games, I feel like those first 3 games kind of sapped my energy a little bit. Like I used up all my nervous and physical energy, I feel, for the first 3 games, especially that third game. And I feel like in some ways I had very little left. Like, because I feel like my physical shape, that's probably going to be my priority going forward to, if I'm gonna, improve my chess game and focus on getting back into serious chess, that's gonna be priority number one for me. If I ever have time, I need to improve really on my physical shape because I felt like towards the in the second half of the rapid, the reason I tapered off is because I just didn't have that same energy, right? And as a result, I started making more mistakes. I started taking more time. I started playing a bit passively in some games. I started like not being able to convert as much in the later half of the game. I just simply ran out of energy. And I think that, listening to Mark Heimann's interview, we can obviously all attest to how important physical shape is, right, to your performance. And I think the biggest thing with Mark, what Mark is doing is that because of the nature of his physical activity, powerlifting, he's able to sustain his level pretty much throughout long games and throughout long tournaments and throughout his training. He's able to kind of sustain his energy at all times. And I think that's like a very underestimated factor when it comes to adult improvers, right? Because I think we can all attest to the fact that, we can all play at our peak at a much higher level than our actual rating, 200, 300 points, right? We can all probably do that, right? Like on a good tournament, I can probably play 26, 2700, right? Like you can probably play 23, 2400 and so on and so forth on a very good day. But the problem with adults is usually sustaining the level, right? Something comes up, usually like we have off days, we have days when we don't have the same energy, not to mention something happened with the family or whatever, and then sustaining the level becomes incredibly difficult. So as a result, we can't actually make an overall improvement because there's going to be days when we play below our level, right? So I think what Mark was able to do is to consistently always play at a pretty high level. And I think that goes a long way, right? Because there's going to be games when you play 26, 2700, but if your floor is, let's say, 24, 2500, if you never, let's say, start playing like a 2000 or a 2200 when you're like a 2500, I think that goes a long way. And I think that being in good physical condition goes a long way for that, right? So I think that, at least for me, I noticed that was the big difference. So I don't think it's so much because of the pressure. I feel like it's almost like I did something special and it was hard to find that motivation to keep going in the same way. Like I just couldn't find that extra mile of energy, for the rest of the tournament as much as I tried. Became beginning to be a challenge. And then of course after the rest day, I was able to recharge and do that again in the Blitz, right? But I think in the Rapid, at least specifically, that's at least sort of what I think caused me tapering off in the second half of my Rapid event.
Okay. Well, before we do move on to the Blitz, I would like to hear a little bit more about your game against Merzin. So just to present it in sort of broad brushstrokes for our listeners, I mean, it was a relatively smooth win where it was equal-ish and he kind of got the better of you in the end game. But I'm just curious, since he had this fantastic result, if you knew anything about him going in and if you were particularly impressed after the game or just felt like it was more what you were alluding to about fatigue starting to set in.
Well, I think it's a little bit of everything, right? I think he did play a great game against me, so all the credit goes to him. I think he played this. I think Murzin is one of these players. He works with Kabalia, who is a Russian trainer, and he's one of those players who I don't think he goes for the most principled, heavy theoretical battles, but I think he is maybe a little bit narrow, which is very good for Blitz. So he plays a lot of these schemes, but he has like excellent feel for these schemes. He's probably played thousands of games in them, training maybe with an engine, maybe with his friends, right, with his coaches, and so he just has a tremendous feel. So the positions might be equal, but he will have a deeper feel for these positions than, let's say, someone like me who maybe doesn't have as much experience. And so of course I had a fine position out of the opening, but then I made some wrong positional decisions, and as soon as I did, he was quick to punish them and outclass me, like basically showcase his Russian school, right? It was a classic Russian schoolboy game, and I think he can go pretty far. I think he reminds me a little about this other Russian player, Vladislav Artemiev, who's kind of also similar style, very universal, very solid, kind of like very good at rapid and blitz. Maybe in classical, it remains to be seen how far Murzin can accomplish. My guess is he'll become like Artemiev type, somewhere between 2700 and 2750. but he's always going to be a deadly player in Rapid and Blitz. So I didn't know him that deeply before the tournament, but I think once I played him, I kind of realized who I'm dealing with, and I understood why he's such a good Rapid and Blitz player and why he's going to be a contender for years to come, always be a threat in this tournament.
Fascinating analysis. Yeah, that's a really good insight about like those system players being able to sort of punch above their weight and faster time controls. And again, it's probably some lessons that us amateurs can take from that as well. The value of really knowing the main ideas of your opening. And Alex, before we do move on to the World Blitz, maybe we could talk about the conditions for the players a little bit. I wrote about this for listeners. I went the first day as a media member and was disappointed a bit with the conditions for media. I wasn't able to get into the playing hall very easily. And it was quite crowded in the media room. So I ended up deciding I would rather just watch the tournament from the comfort of my home. Now, I know there was a big players room. Well, big might be a stretch, but a players room where you guys waited in between rounds. I believe I heard Dubov complaining that people were rather closely kind of packed in there. What was it like for you, like being like in between rounds and fraternizing with all of these amazing players?
Yeah, it was a good experience. I think it was probably like a 8 or 9 out of 10. I think it was overall pretty good. I think the drawback is, yeah, maybe the room was a little bit small. It was a bit crowded. Sometimes not a place to sit. Also, it's pretty cold outside, especially in the beginning of the tournament. And sometimes the windows would be open. I guess people would go out for smoke or something. There would be like a balcony, and it would often be a bit cold in the room as well. But okay, like these are minor inconveniences. I don't think it's like a big deal. But on the other hand, they had good snacks, good good refreshments, good place to rest between games. So I could use my phone there once I so overall I think it was decent. It probably could have been a bit better, but I think that was probably not really that much of a complaint for me at least.
Did a lot of players, you mentioned using your phone in between rounds, did players have laptops?
I haven't noticed necessarily. I think, yeah, I didn't really notice. I think most people just used phones. Yeah, laptops. Yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, I guess probably not so much. Because I didn't even bring my laptop with me on those days. I mean, I can always research people also through my phone if I want to prepare, but there's usually not much time to prepare between games anyway. So I was just kind of like resting between games, not really worrying so much about prep.
Yeah. And obviously you have long history and I'm sure friends and enemies among all your fellow Grandmaster and International Master cohorts. But did you have any sort of new interactions in between rounds, make any new friends, forced to sit next to anyone you didn't want to, etc.?
No, not really. I don't really think I have enemies in the chess world, at least not that I'm aware of. Friends? Yeah, I wouldn't say that I have like close friends among people who played in the tournament. I mean, at least in the men's section. Uh, yeah, I mean, I get along with a lot of people. I know a lot of the people, but like in terms of close friends, I don't think like there's. So yeah, I think with most people, I just have a neutral professional relationship, right? So I don't really dislike anyone necessarily too much, but yeah, I also not really necessarily close friends either with most people, just normal professional relationship, I would say.
Okay. Well, let's bring it forward to the World Blitz, where you had maybe like in the Rapid, you started fast and kind of tapered off. And in the Blitz, you started a bit slow and then finished quite strong. Do you think there was something in the mindset or just the way things broke that things played out that way?
Yeah, to be honest, I think in the Blitz, the first couple of rounds, I was a bit nervous. And the first game, I really wanted to win because I knew that if I win, maybe I'll get a chance to play Magnus. I knew that colors would match, and I missed him by one board. That he's like one of the few top players I haven't played yet, so I really wanted to play him over the board if possible. So I feel like I was a bit nervous. First game, I had a horrible technique. I had a winning position, and then I was finding all the possible ways not to win the game, but eventually I somehow still won against a FIDE master, but it was a very shaky game. Yeah, then I played Hikaru. That was an interesting game. I think he played very well that game, especially from a certain point on. He found some really nice concepts, nice ideas, which I thought were pretty impressive for Blitz. So he really showcased his very high level in that game, I thought. So I didn't really mind losing that game. I probably could have played a bit better, but I think I played reasonably okay by my standards, given that it was a Blitz game. Third game against Mishra was like also a bit shaky. I almost found a way to lose an equal position, but I held the draw. I think I started my fourth game was quite a decent one. I played a sharp opening, d4 e6, c4 b6 against this famous player who beat Magnus with the watch, which was like an interesting. But
Suleimanov, right?
Yeah, Suleimanov, yeah. But I think I won a nice game, but it was alarming that I missed the mate in one in the end. I still won. I was still winning anyway, but I guess that loomed trouble for later rounds, like against Savian, for example. Yeah, and then round 5 was a pretty lousy game where I played like a different opening than I normally did. I wanted to just because I felt like I wasn't maybe getting as much from my previous white games in the Rapid, and I just decided, okay, it was a recommendation from my friend, recommended that if I'm gonna if I have ambitions to get to the top 8, I have to just basically try to win out, and so I have to just play principled. But this kind of backfired in this game, and I remember after that game I was just so upset, and normally I would text my friend after the game, and this time I was just I'm kind of in a bad mindset. I don't think I want to text him at the moment, because if I have nothing good to say, there's a common expression, if you have nothing good to say, better not to say anything at all. So after that game, I just stopped going to the refreshment area between games. I was just I'm just gonna take the tournament in my own hands. From that point on, I'm just gonna go with my stuff, and whatever happens, happens. And the next 2 games, when I played that opening that I was recommended not to play, I had that chip on the shoulder. I was like, I'm gonna show that this opening has more bite than you think. And the next game with white, the next game I won with black with d4 e6, and then my next white game, I probably played my best game of the Blitz tournament against Raja Harshit, who has previously beat me in a very important game in 2023 Chess Congress to snatch first place from me. So I kind of really wanted to beat him. He's a pretty strong GM, good theoretical player. And I played a very nice game. I just beat him very soundly.
I liked that one. That was like a classic Capablanca game or something, right? That was the one with the backward C pawn.
Yeah, it was like a nearly flawless, blitz game on my part, right? Like maybe high 90, probably above 95 accuracy would be my guess. And I was like, okay, you know what? Maybe I should just give myself more credit. Maybe when I have chip on my shoulder, when I play with that kind of fight in me, when I play principled, because the thing is, after I lost that game with white, I was like, I'm not gonna let that loss define my tournament. And I was very determined that I'm gonna fight back, right? Because my friend would always tell me, psychologically, you have to be a fighter till the end, right? You have to have a positive mindset, right? Because very often I'm prone to being a bit negative, right? Sometimes very negative. So I wanted to make sure that I get rid of all the negative emotions, and I'm just gonna have faith the rest of the way, and I'm just gonna play my stuff and just go along with it. And that's kind of, that approach also helped me bounce back from the very difficult Savian loss, which I guess you're gonna get to next.
Yeah, that one was topsy-turvy. That one was definitely entertaining, and I'm sure heartbreaking when it happened. So Alex, you hung. So there was a point where Alex just had a totally winning position, and there was a point where, first of all, you just put your rook somewhere where his bishop could take it. That was not a sacrifice, right?
No.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. You never know. I never know when I'm looking at Grandmaster game. So Alex, +5 on the engine, and then hangs an exchange. He still goes on to be winning, but then things got hairy, yeah, and you lost a tough one.
Yeah, no, I think so. I was able to bounce back from my round 5 loss, and then I won 3 games in a row after that, right? And I was feeling great, and then I played against Savian, and I was playing a great game, actually, really great game. Completely outplay him, but he's a very resilient player, right? He doesn't give in so easily, right? So the problem is I started using a lot of time to convert that position, and I was making progress, but I was also getting below 10 seconds. And then that's where, when you below 10 seconds, kind of all bets are off, right? There's going to be randomness, right? And yeah, then I blundered the exchange, then I bounced back from that. But then, yes, when I still had 10 seconds and I was already winning in the opposite color bishop, queen and bishop against queen and bishop, I made this classic mistake when I started playing too quickly. I started playing automatic moves, right? Like I saw something that looked promising, like taking the pawn on a5 and whatever, but that allowed him to get back in the game. I lost like a crucial tempo as well. So there's a very important rule in chess called when you see a good move, even if you think it's winning, look for a better move, right? And I missed a couple of very easy knockouts at around that point, right? So even though I was still winning, it made the position from like easily winning, where he has to pretty much resign on the spot, to actually where I have to find some very difficult moves, right? And even when you have 10 seconds, like instead of playing the move in 1 second, I could have like just disciplined myself and, spend maybe 5 seconds and realize, okay, I have this better move. And if I find that, I win the game. But, like obviously when there's nerves and, you're below 10 seconds, all sorts of randomness happens, right? So I think I could be forgiven for, sometimes, things happen, right? And end up losing the game. I ended up allowing counterplay and I got checkmated. But I think the important thing is that I realized that and going into the tournament is that when you're gonna have 13 rounds of blitz, it's inevitable you're gonna have a heartbreaker somewhere, right? Like it's just
Right.
there's no way you're gonna have you play a smooth 13 round tournament where everything completely just goes your way, right? It's just it doesn't work like that usually, right? Especially when you're playing strong players. So I was like, I forgave myself for that. I realized, okay, this is the moment where I had the heartbreaker, and instead of like getting really, really upset, I was like, okay, that's fine. This is my heartbreak for the tournament. I'm very thankful it was not the last round, right? I always try to look at it, okay, like it could have been worse. It could have been the last round. It could have been the one that cost me like thousands of dollars. But this is not the last round. I still have an opportunity to bounce back. Right. And I started interacting with a lot of my fans between rounds, because some of my students, private students, kids I teach at schools, some coaches, they actually were there live, right? And I just, had a good time. I talked to them between rounds. I just took it easy, right? Um, and I was able to bounce back. I played quite well the rest of the tournament, 3 out of 4 against all higher rated players, and I actually finished with a very decent prize. Again, my takeaway is that when I had a bad moment in the tournament, I was like, my main goal was I was not gonna let that bad moment define my tournament. Like that was like my main priority. And I think when you have that approach, I think it's easier to avoid, tilt. And I think you have to always have a positive mindset to realize, okay, it could always be worse. So when you lose a tough game at an amateur level, let's say, or anyone loses, my advice is realize it's not the last round. You can still bounce back, and you should try to bounce back, right? And I think, we're capable of more than we think we give ourselves credit to, right? Like we're actually very resilient players, right? And I feel like I showed that in this tournament. And again, it's like the same thing about setting example for kids, right? Like, like it's very easy to just like get upset over losing and like just wanting to quit. But I wanted to play with grit at this tournament because I knew that I'm not a professional anymore. I didn't prepare properly for this tournament. Not even during the tournament, I was professional. Like I was commuting with, I was
Right.
even teaching camp the morning of the.
Wow.
So I was really not, any definition you can get of non-professional, I was following that exact principle, right? I was basically everything you can describe a non-professional to be. But the one thing I wanted to make sure is that the one thing I told myself before the tournament that whatever happens, I'm gonna play with grit, with fire, with passion. I'm gonna give it my best, give it my all. I'm gonna enjoy the tournament. Whatever happens, even if I'm losing all my games, I'm gonna continue fighting till the end and show a good example. And I feel like, I've managed that. So I was really happy about that.
Yeah, the value of psychological strength. Although, of course, I do, from my perspective, I do feel like you're underselling your actual chess abilities. I mean, obviously, I'm sure it's frustrating to be off your peak, but obviously, you've been a top 100 player. You're incredibly accomplished. So, but nonetheless, good lessons for us Potzers.
Well, I mean, I definitely think I still in Blitz, and Rapid, I definitely proved that I'm still GM level. So I think if I have to estimate at the moment, I probably would guess that in Blitz, I'm probably still 2600 level FIDE, realistically. I think that's not an over exaggeration. And I think in Rapid, maybe somewhere in the 2500s, somewhere there. And in Classical, I think it remains to be seen. But I definitely think that at least given how Blitz and Rapid went, I definitely feel like at least I should be able to get back to 2500 FIDE. How far beyond 2500 I can get back to remains to be seen, right? Because I think even if you take my peak form when I was 2650, I think if you look at it realistically, I was probably more like a 2630, right? Like, because when you peak at a certain level, probably certain things go your way. So maybe realistically, I was more like a 2620, 2630 player. And then you take into account deflation, right? That would be at least like 50 to 70 points. So I think like even me and my peak by current standards, that would be maybe like a 2550 player. And then take into account that I'm not a professional anymore. I don't train as hard physically on openings, on calculation, everything. So I think 2500 is actually quite a reasonable estimate, right? So I was hoping that it's still 2500 rather than like 2300, if that makes sense. So that was my fear, that like my level might be 2300, because realistically I started there already for a while. I started performing at like 2300 level. Like I was drawing 2100s left and right. And it was just not good. Like I was really, really struggling, and I was like wondering, maybe just 2300 is just different than it was before. Maybe they're just so strong that like it's hard to keep up. But okay, like now I'm a little bit more optimistic. At least I feel like I should be able to get back to 2500, and then baby steps, and then after that, we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's something everyone, from our generation. I mean, I'm probably a generation beyond you, but everyone who's been around for a while, definitely, it's not uncommon to experience these things. And one more thing from the Blitz tournament, from your Blitz tournament, the last round game against Serrana. So Serrana, 24-year-old, plus peak rating over 2700. Obviously a formidable opponent, and this is the money game. Probably if either one of you wins, you win thousands of dollars. If it's a draw, I'm guessing you get close to nothing, right?
Mm.
And then you reach this end game where maybe you're a tiny bit better. It's king and bishop versus king and pawn, equal material, but you've got a tiny bit more space. One thing is, so I downloaded the games from the Week in Chess, and then imported them from ChessBase into a LiChess study. But one thing I didn't have was the clocks, which obviously in stuff like when I was referring to the Sevian game, that makes a big difference in evaluating like the narrative of a given match. But in that one, it looked to me like you weren't willing to concede a draw, even though Serrana's objectively a stronger player. What was your mindset as that game went on with so much on the line?
Well, the thing is, like, I'm a little bit embarrassed to say, but somehow I was under the impression there are actually 40 prizes in Blitz. For whatever reason, I thought it's actually 40 prizes in Blitz. And obviously, if it's 40 prizes, like in Rapid, I assumed the draw was actually good enough for a decent prize as well. So honestly, I was just trying to be solid. I was making sure that I try not to lose that game, oddly enough. And when my opponent in the end overpressed, he clearly tried very hard to win, and then I was happy to. If he was going to overpress and give me chances, I was ready to pounce on it, right? Like I knew that there's a good chance he'll overpress and try hard to win because he's a higher rated player and maybe he wants to be more ambitious. Plus, for the most of the game, he had more time on the clock. Now, the interesting about Serrana is that I actually had an online Title Tuesday game with him. I think it might have also been the last round. We had exactly the same opening. In fact, if you look at the database, I think the first, I don't remember, 10, 12 moves might have been exactly the same. And I think at some point he might have deviated. And again, once again, I forgot to play this G4 idea, which would have put some pressure on him. But somehow I was just trying to make a draw, and he clearly did not want. And and then I won, right? So but at some point he had a big time advantage. He was playing much quicker. He had I think over a minute left, and I had under 30 seconds left or something like that. At that point, I was really making sure, but I was clutch. I was able to come up with some good defensive moves and not collapse. And then eventually, when he did overpress, I was very happy to win, obviously. And that to me, that erased all the negativity I had from the game against Sevian, because I knew that getting 8.5, getting into the money, it's definitely way better than I could have ever expected. And who knows, maybe if I beat Sevian, maybe my tournament actually goes differently, right? So it's I'm thankful for everything. I couldn't have asked for anything better. And overall, just a great way to end the tournament for me.
Yeah, well, congratulations. It's great to see. And as you say, I'm sure it's inspiring for, everyone who knows you and knows that this isn't, you're not able to put all your professional energy into your chess, but, can still, you're like the, in baseball, apologies to international listeners. There are these aging pitchers who can't throw it as fast as they used to, but they learn to throw more pitches that spin more. And, that's kind of what we all have to try to do as the years go on, it feels like. But Alex, we managed to make it 40 minutes without discussing all of the nonsense that went on this tournament. But one thing I would like for sure to hear about is how much of the noise gets through to the players. So I believe jeansgate obviously was the first controversy. So with this thing going on where Magnus is, ultimately kicked out of the tournament, like how aware of that were you as the tournament went on?
Yeah, I knew pretty much, when I started round 9, I already knew, like, Magnus wasn't paired, and, like, there was, like, already rumblings, so I already pretty much knew about it. But then, of course, I found out more about it. But yeah, actually, speaking of that, it's actually kind of interesting because, like, in this tournament, you have to get an accreditation, right? They need to make sure you're here, right? Like, because a lot of people travel from out of, overseas and stuff, right? So I came in on the day before to get my badge, right? And I wasn't. Some things in the dress code weren't like entirely clear for me, honestly. And I actually dressed, I think, in jeans and something else. And I came in there and I asked some people who I thought maybe knows, is this okay? And then I think one of the staff told me like, no, probably it's okay, but we're not sure. And then like one of the players told me it looks like jeans, probably better not to. And then I was like, okay, I'm not gonna take any chances. I'm gonna just like wear something like much more professional so that like I'm gonna get rid of the loose ends. Because like for me it would be very devastating because I would not I don't stay in a hotel, right? So I would not even get a chance to change between rounds, right? So if I, basically I would lose the tournament if I would like show up in improper attire. So I really wanted to make sure that whatever happens, like I'm not losing the tournament because of that. So even though it was cold outside and I would have preferred to wear something a bit warmer, I was like, okay, like it doesn't matter. I'm not jeopardizing anything. And obviously after this thing with Magnus happened, I was very thankful I did because
Right.
otherwise, yeah, I would be in a bad situation. Um, so yeah, I think obviously I took it very seriously because I know that already. I think a couple of years ago there was a player, Anna Maria, because I forget her name.
Anamaya Kazarian.
Yeah. So I knew that they're taking these things pretty seriously. So I wanted to make sure that that I don't take any chances with that. So, but yeah, of course that was quite a controversy, right? And then what happened in the end as well. It was just yeah, there are just a lot of weird things happening in this tournament between the Magnus stuff and Ivanchuk and everything else. It was just all a bit weird.
Yeah, Ivanchuk just was visibly devastated by one of his losses and moment that went viral and all
Yeah,
too.
I think, I think. Speaking of that, I think I'll just like to say that I'm really grateful for all the supporters I've always had, my friends. I think it's very tough to be like a lone wolf in chess because, like for example, for a long time when I was a younger player, I remember I was usually kind of a little bit more of a lone wolf, right? And now I felt like I actually had a whole community behind me, supporting me, like cheering me on when I win and supporting me when I lose, and just like kind of I felt that energy, right? And I feel like it makes like I also had a very painful loss. I think equally painful as Ivanchuk, right? Maybe you can
Right.
argue even more painful. But for me, what helped me bounce back is that I had all these people supporting me there, and I had to play for them. But for him, it's much harder because he's kind of more of a lone wolf, right? So I think that's what made it so much harder for him. And I think that's kind of the hard part with chess, right? I feel like we've heard stories, unfortunately, about meltdowns of chess players, right? Not gonna mention, but we've heard even like, people have meltdowns, right, in their own way, right? Like, about US Championship this year, right? There was a story, right, and last year, and then 2 years ago as well, right? Like with the two pretty strong players. So it's a tough field, right? Like playing chess is very grueling. So I think it's kind of important to have a community and good support system behind you, right? Otherwise, yeah, dealing with chess could become a very difficult, lonely thing, right? And I think that's I think a good lesson for everyone, right? Like make sure you take good care of your physical shape, mental shape, and make sure you have support system behind you, right? Otherwise it could just become very difficult, honestly. And yeah, of course I feel bad for all of these chess players who have to experience these. Everyone handles it in a different way, but I think that yeah, it's just very tough to see, obviously. So
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned earlier about having the mindset that some sort of crushing loss was basically an inevitability. I
Yeah.
think that having that sort of framework going in probably helped a lot, and it's probably not a bad one. Obviously, for people listening who play classical tournaments, in their free time, it's not, we play worse than Alex does, but it's not as inevitable or 100% certainty that there's going to be some sort of setback if you're playing a slower game. But certainly, I think that there is a lesson to be taken in terms of like preparing yourself for that possibility and hoping to mitigate the self-flagellation that you might engage in when it happens. And to your point about Ivanchuk, yeah, when I interviewed him probably 3 or 4 years ago at this point, one thing that came across is he's, despite, being one of the older players on the circuit, he's still extremely ambitious. He was still talking about getting to the world championship, the classical world championship. So I think that mindset, when he's that close to sort of breaking through, I mean, not breaking through, obviously he's a legend, but achieving a sort of renaissance and, potentially putting up an amazing result. I do think that there's something in like the overall mindset going in that maybe could have softened the blow. But again, just a painful and relatable moment. And obviously, Ivanchuk, he may be a lone wolf when he's there in the hall, but obviously he's got tons of fans rooting for him. So it was tough to see.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and speaking of other stuff, yeah, with Magnus, yeah, I don't know. Like, I think a lot of people already spoke about it, right? So probably, but I don't know. It's to me, it's a little hard to comment on all that, right? Because I think the thing is, we're not very good at mind reading usually. Yes, so I
Yeah.
think we don't really know like what people's true intentions are, right? Some of it, maybe it was kind of just happened like a little bit accidental, but maybe, there's a little bit more beyond it. It's a little hard to
Is this
say for
referring to the draw or to drawing with Nepo or the jeansgate?
a little bit of both, right? But it's,
Yeah.
some people argue it can even be interconnected, right? Because maybe if the jeansgate did not happen, maybe, the FIDE wouldn't give in as much, right, into
Right.
changing
I
rules
think,
or
yeah.
whatever. But I think, all of it could have been a little bit interconnected, maybe not necessarily planned ahead of time, like what people would think with conspiracies. But the thing is, like, yeah, it just sometimes things just happen in a certain way, right? Like a lot takes a perfect storm to happen, right? Like Nepo had to come back from 2-0, right, which is like quite an improbable feat in itself, right? So for that to even be a possibility. So yeah, I don't know. It was very interesting, but it reminded me of that situation where Russia and India shared a gold medal for the online Olympiad, which I remember very clearly in 2020, COVID year, right, where India's internet went out or something like that, right? So sometimes I think there is room for that. In this particular case, I was honestly quite surprised about what happened because I thought that they only played 3 extra games, and I mean, I figured I just think that the regulation should have at some point included Armageddon, right? In case it goes for
Yeah, for
a very
sure.
long time. I think maybe the regulations just are not ideal, right? Did not anticipate this kind of scenario, but okay, that's something that I guess the organizers could consider for next year's. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Yeah, I think it will be probably water under the bridge once something new, interesting comes up in the chess world.
Yeah, yeah. The next drama will come soon enough. But yeah, to your point, I do hope at the bare minimum that lessons are learned and these, more bright lines, as they say, like more clear rules can be put in, both in the case of the dress code and the tie breaks and
Yeah.
whatever those rules are, they just have to be adhered to. I don't care
Even
who.
prizes, it wasn't even clear to me what the prizes are because I wasn't sure if they're shared, if they're using tie breaks. Like I wasn't really thinking much about prizes ahead of time before events, but like the point is like even yeah, I think just in general, more clarity is better. Like in general, I'm the kind of person I prefer clarity over lack of clarity, so I think that would be that in my case I would play regardless because it's in New York, but yeah, if I would have to travel all the way through to play and then and then there would be uncertainty over something, then that would be kind of inconvenient, let's just say.
Yeah. And what did you think of the Blitz format of having fewer rounds and then the top eight go to a playoff?
I didn't mind it either way. In a way, I was kind of happy about that because I knew that that means that if I make top eight, that would be amazing. If I don't, that means that I could teach camp full day instead of half a day. So that
Right.
was a good thing for me, I guess.
Speaking of clarity, yeah. Yeah, you would know one way or
Yeah, I mean,
another.
I told my boss that okay, 99% I will be available full day on the 31st, but maybe 1% chance I make it to Sunday.
Right.
And that would not be the worst excuse to, have to leave early, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And did you have an opinion? I guess this is your first World Rapid and Blitz, but I know some of the woman players were frustrated that they didn't feel like they were going to did get as much attention. A, just because they weren't in the same playing hall, but then obviously with all the drama that went on, that was even magnified.
Yeah, I guess yeah, that's a good point. I haven't really necessarily thought about it, right? But and also even with the drama, like a lot of you can argue that the women players, the two friends played each other, right? They could have, if they know that they could have, let's say, also shared the title, maybe they would have done that, right? There was an argument like that as
Yeah,
well. So yeah, I don't know. I think there's always going to be some imperfections when you're talking about running a huge event, right? Like on the first day there was like a little bit inconvenient in terms of the door was open. So like when I had to leave the for the day, right, and get my coat, it was extremely cold waiting in that line, because the door was open, right? So there was like these minor inconveniences, right? So it's never going to be fully 100% perfect, but I think all things considered, I think it was fine. I'm usually not someone who complains about conditions, and I don't even play that much anymore anyway, but of course, I'm sure something could have been better. Like, I have no question about it. It can always be better. But I think they did their best. It's obviously very difficult to organize an event like that. And kudos to them for, doing it here. And it was a really great honor for me to participate. And hopefully it'll be in New York again at some point. But if not, I'll be happy that I got the chance to participate once in this tournament.
yeah. I know that I understand completely why FIDE wanted to have it on Wall Street and the venue itself. Like I got goosebumps the one time I did go into the playing hall, and the building itself was historic and beautiful, and so many strong players in there. So they're definitely like I get what they were going for, but even if it's going to be in the US, even in the New York area, I have to say I would prefer more space, even if it's like, on Long Island or something, where there's more convention space. I think that would be preferable to everyone being crammed in and there being no play zone and stuff like that. But I mean, it was certainly it wasn't all bad by any means, and certainly the officials of FIDE, I think, were kind of dealt a bad hand with some of the behavior of the players.
Yeah, I think it was all just some of it maybe could have been avoided, I think. But yeah, I mean, when you're dealing with like a big organization and the top chess player, it's not easy, right? And we know about the top chess players are not always the easiest people. I mean, we know one former world champion who's been, a little bit difficult in recent times with, some other stuff. So yeah, it's just not, it's just.
Yeah, very diplomatically put. And if you look at sort of the through line, of Kasparov in his pricklier days, and as you probably allude to, Kramnik and Carlsen with these spats, the thing is to become world champion, you're in the domain of chess, you're right more than any other human.
Yeah.
So I think it brings about this mindset that you're right generally, and
Yeah.
I think it's hard for some people to overcome that.
Yeah, because like you have to be right in every area, right? If you're a great chess player, you have to always be winning, you have to always be confident, right? Like that's the mentality you need. So then you carry it over to other things where you're not as big of an expert in, and then that's where it could get very dangerous. If you say with such great confidence, that you think you're always right, then you start believing it, and then it just turns into something that's yeah, where you could easily just take it too far. I mean, I'll give you even an example, right? Like I played a Title Tuesday warm-up. I don't really play much Title Tuesday these days simply because I don't have much time. I coach at schools, right? Like I do a lot of teaching, but I wanted to play a couple of Title Tuesdays right before the Rapid and Blitz to get warm-up. And I was pretty surprised that even though I did not get any prize, didn't do anything like super special, I got like 8 out of 11 with a lot of draws, like no losses, but like very solid performance. And then I just got curious. I checked my accuracy of the games, and it turned out that the average accuracy of my games out of 11 rounds was above 93, and supposedly that's supposed to be a bit high, right, for someone my level. Like that should be probably more like a Magnus and Wesley territory. And I was starting to wonder why that is, because I don't even think I played that exceptionally well. I didn't do anything special. I made some mistakes. I mean, I did play pretty good, and then I didn't do as well the second title Tuesday. My level tapered off. Another example of my physical shape dropping off. Like I was able to like play a good tournament first 11, but then the second one I was already like had less energy, and that was the first sign of like, that maybe becoming a factor, which is also another reason why I was happy that the Blitz was like not only 1 day, not 2 days. So I think it was beneficial for me personally. But I was starting to wonder, like, yeah, why that is that some players have higher accuracy than, let's say, like top players. And I think that there are two theories actually I have on that, which are very realistic. I think one of them is it depends a lot on your style, and two, it depends a lot on your openings. Because the thing is, like, some top players, they do a lot of experimenting, right? They can play h4, they can play a3, they can play all sorts of nonsense opening. And the thing is, when you play complete randomness, then your opponent don't know what to do. The game is less theoretical. There's going to be more mistakes early on. There's going to be more blunders. So the accuracy is going to just drop off, right? And then the mutual accuracy. And then you can win games with like an 80% accuracy or whatever, because the game is just too complicated, right? But if you're one of those players who plays principal theoretical lines all the time in Blitz and Title Tuesday, and you just know it very, very well, and there are definitely players like that who just like play the same stuff and they know it extremely, extremely well, they're gonna potentially show very high accuracies, right? Because very often a lot of the games will go into theory. Then what will happen is very often people will deviate, they'll blunder quickly. And if they blunder quickly, you might just get 98 accuracy just like that, right? Because people blunder quickly like that. And the second time, usually the accuracy is very high, is if it goes deep into the end game. And if you're playing a solid opening, solid repertoire, you can end up getting a lot of long, drawn-out end games, right? Where it's much harder to make like big mistakes. So then that's another way like you're gonna get high accuracies, right? So if you're one of those players who is prone to playing theoretical solid lines, solid style, not taking huge risks, and playing a lot of end games, you're going to have a lot of high accuracy games simply because people will either blunder and then you're going to take advantage and you're just going to win, right? If they blunder a piece, you're just going to win. Or if you play a long end game, right? Whereas if you're one of these unbalanced players like Ferrugia or Nepo or Arjun or whatever, then yeah, you're going to get some unbalanced positions, and in Blitz you're going to make mistakes. So I think a lot of it, to be honest, with the accuracy, it depends very on stylistic stuff. So that's why I think that Kramnik's reports on accuracy is not always accurate, because I think a lot of it depends too much on these kind of styles, and I think that's why it's not an ideal metric. There are just too many other extraneous factors that go, and I don't think he's ever mentioned any of those in any of his videos. So I think that's at least my take on all of this, why, even someone top level could be a little bit misled when it comes to something like that, and then like, let's say, forming opinions, and let's say raising suspicions.
Yeah, and Alex, even in looking at your games through the LiChess study, I know before we were recording, you were saying you hadn't had a chance to review the games in a lot of detail yet. A lot of your accuracy scores and your opponent's accuracy scores were pretty high on that too. So that
yeah,
supports.
I think, like last game, and I guess like my game against Raja Harshad, so I was very happy actually about that I was able to, also play very good chess here, right? Like basically, that maybe I'm just legitimately a pretty good blitz player, right? Like, and I think that, and for that reason, I was very happy that, of course, even if, let's say, someone like Daniel or whatever, like, would not have a great tournament, it wouldn't mean anything, right? In one tournament, you can always do badly, but it was great to see that Daniel had a great blitz event, right? And he was doing very well on Rapid as well. And basically, it was great to see, honestly. And it was just kind of interesting how when Kramnik made this post at the end of the tournament about like how, okay, like everyone who finished top 8 were like actual legitimate blitz players, he conveniently left out Daniel, who finished the same score with 9.5, who was like 9 and 10, just missed out on tiebreaks. I feel like it was a very convenient omission, right? Like which is again another like not very nice thing, right? Because like if you go a little bit down the list, you see a lot of players like Daniel Naroditsky, the two Bortniks, right, who are like more like blitz specialists, right? Not household names in terms of like high-level chess, but like specific blitz specialists. And Lazavik also did very well in the blitz, obviously, right? Like 8.5. So it was good to see that a lot of the players who, played very well online, they also did very well here, right? And again, even if they didn't do well here, it wouldn't matter, right? In one tournament, anything can happen, of course, right? But it's good to see that more people than not did very well in the blitz and showed very high accuracy, and it showed that that chess.com is doing a great job. That I think it's giving everybody a peace of mind that everything is legitimate. And some players are just very good blitz players, genuinely very good blitz players, right? And I think, and the point is, if you're suspicious of your opponent, you're going to play worse against that opponent than if you're not. For example, let's say you take example of like Kramnik against Jospin, Jose Martinez matches, right? Like they played 2 matches and they played kind of on equal terms. One might wonder, well, why in these matches they played on equal terms, but online Jose Martinez was completely dominating? And I actually have 2 theories behind it, right? One of the theories is that obviously when Kramnik played him online, he was suspicious of Jose. If your opponent, you cannot focus the same way, right? I think you would agree with it, right? It's very difficult to play chess when you think your opponent might be cheating, right? Even if you're not sure. So that's, I think, a very big reason, right? Whereas there, he had a very strong peace of mind, right? Like he knew that opponent is playing legitimate conditions and he can play chess freely. And I think another reason, which I think nobody really talks about as much, or at least very few, is preparation, right? Because like someone like Jose, or like there are many other players, they play their schemes, right? And when you have a world champion, former world champion, who definitely knows how to prepare for matches, right? Like he's played like many world championship matches, right? Like he will find a weakness, a weaker area in the opponent's repertoire, right? And he'll pounce on it, right? And he will be able to be put in better position to succeed, right? He'll get the right type of opening positions. I know for me, it would help me a lot if I was able to prepare. When I was able to prepare for my opponent ahead of time, who was like a bit narrow. So I feel like that's probably one of the reasons why, it's the performances were like different, right? Because, and these are like 2 very strong reasons, which I feel like aren't really mentioned enough. So that's why I figured I'll bring them up, because it's, yeah, I feel like, like the whole conclusion about this match is a bit standstill, but like I think that shows that like everybody is legitimate, right? And I feel like also, I feel like a lot of players get criticism of like not going to World Rapid and Blitz. Well, guess what? Like I've never played World Rapid and Blitz because I don't want to spend 5 arm, a leg, and a kidney to play a tournament, right? Like, so I mean, not everybody's like, like wanting to take risks, right? Like, so even if you do think you have a good chance of, getting top prizes, like Wesley So, this is the first time he played World Rapid and Blitz, right? And he has nothing to hide, right? So like, why only like Jose Martinez gets like this rep that he avoids playing Rapid and Blitz, when someone like Wesley hasn't played it either until it was this year, all right? Like until it was in US. So my point is that, I just think that, a lot of it is blown out of proportion, and I think that nobody has to justify anything, right? And I feel like chess.com is an incredible platform. It does a great job of doing making sure that everybody's playing fairly. Yeah, I think it's just disappointing that like now players have to like justify their good play, right? It doesn't feel right. I wish things would have been done a little bit more behind the scenes and it would not have gone public, because now you get players who, legitimately have to worry about all this. And I feel like these are like valid reasons why, why I can sort of see why Kramnik is like saying the things he does, but I can also give these reasons why he's not always accurate, right? Because he hasn't really, mentioned these arguments, right? These counter arguments. And I feel like one of the mistakes people make, and I've learned that throughout like COVID, when people would like trot out like anti-vaccine stuff or whatever else it may be, right? I think very often what happens in research is that people who are doing like lower level research, they're only collecting evidence for their own side, right? But they're not giving counter arguments as well, right? And I feel like that's what we're kind of seeing with the Kramnik stuff, right? Where he's trying to collect evidence for himself to justify his correctness, right? But like, but I feel like there's other sides, right? Other which are not mentioned as much, right? And I feel like it's important to give both sides like equal value, right? And I think that if you're really trying to do like true research, if you're trying to find the actual truth, right? And I feel like that's not always being done in life and in the chess world and anywhere, right? But of course, if you're a top chess player, you're not going to look at things as objectively.
Yeah, well said, and I agree. And also just wanted to echo what you said, Naroditsky in particular. He didn't need to have a good showing to prove anything, as he said when I interviewed him, but so it sure was nice to see. It was very gratifying. So shout out to Danya for amazing performances.
And shout out to him for handling in such a professional way the Ivanchuk situation, because I could see myself if, I'm not as mature as Danya, and I could see myself like smiling or something, or like trying to hold my something, but like Danya was just so professional. So it was really nice to see. Like, I think the way he behaved at that time was just very considerate, very professional, and I was very impressed by how he handled the situation, honestly, and a lot of credit to him for that, I think.
Yeah, speaking of smiling, I wanted to ask you, when a Wonder Liang played A3 against you in the Rapid, was there any smirk, or did he manage to keep a poker face?
Oh, I didn't notice, I didn't look at him, but like I don't even think that was that surprising because he's played it against Dominguez, right? And I think he might have earlier in this tournament. So it was not that surprising because I think a Wonder probably thinks that he's a stronger chess player than I am, and which is, legitimate, right? Like he's much higher FIDE rated than me in the classicals, so, and he's beaten me before several times, so, he should feel like he's a stronger player, and if you're a stronger player, then it makes sense you want to avoid prep, right? You want to just play chess and you feel like you can take some risks against the weaker player and maybe get away with it, and, it was sort of justified. He took some that was probably the game I was the most disappointed in the whole Rapid tournament, because he gave me chances to play, right? Like he took some risks against me, right? And at some point I just got too negative about my position, and I thought I was worse when I was better, and it was just I was taking a lot of time. I was like doing the typical, oh, yeah, like speaking of that game, that was probably the game I was most disappointed in, but no, I was not surprised that he played A3 or any other randomness. I mean, I think he's the player who tends to do that sometimes. He likes to take risks. I think a lot of credit to him. He's a very principled, brave player. But okay, like it's like I think speaking of those surprises, I think the most surprising was Brandon Jacobson trotting A4 against Hikaru, right?
Yeah, that was incredible.
Right, so I feel like that was like way more unusual than a Wonder playing A3 against me, which he's already played in the US Championship, right? So, and A3 is not a bad move. I've played it myself before in tournaments, so it's not actually that unreasonable.
A4, different story. And of course, Brandon also has had his online accusations hurled at him and had a fantastic tournament.
Yeah, A4 rook A3. Yeah, no, that whole situation. Yeah, that was another odd thing that happened, but I don't know. I think. Yeah, it's hard to know what really. Yeah, it's hard to say. Yeah, it's a little hard for me to comment on that, right?
Yeah, well, we at least know Brandon showed he's a very strong player.
Yeah.
We don't know what happened in that other stuff, but yeah, good showing by him.
Yeah,
and a nice win against you.
Yeah, he played great against me. Yeah, that was one of those games where I decided to experiment, but it backfired. My opponent surprised me. I got a position I did not feel, and yeah, it really backfired. So credit to Brandon for playing great game, but that game shows why it's dangerous to experiment in a rapid game, playing something you didn't have as great of a feel for, right? Because then opponent deviates a bit, and then you just don't know where the pieces belong. And he knew where the pieces belong, and he just crushed me completely.
Yeah. Alex, just a couple things as we wrap up. Thanks. This has been awesome. We had one more question from Muskie Books, which was, he said, before playing your Armageddon tiebreak to beat Mamedov in the 2015 World Open, did it occur to you that you could just both share the title? And he also, as a follow-up, wondered if you ever had any events that ended in a non-standard way, similar to these recent developments.
That's a good question. I would have to think. Nothing comes out in my head right away. No, I think generally speaking, yeah, everything ended like I've won several times with Armageddons. I've won US Open before with an Armageddon. I've won the US Championship qualifier online with an Armageddon. Yeah. Yeah, and then let's see. Yeah, so I've usually won Armageddons when I've won playoffs, but in terms of non-standard way, no, I know it never occurred to me like the idea of sharing the title. No, and also like I don't think there's a way to do that with like US championship qualifier, right?
Right.
But yeah, no, it never occurred to me. And anyway, I'm not like close friends with my man. And anyway, I don't really like to I don't really want to prearrange games. I think generally I don't prearrange games anymore. Maybe I've done a little bit in the past, but these days if I think a draw is good, I would maybe just offer it early in the game. It depends on the opening also. Like I might play safe then and just offer a draw if I wanted, but normally I don't really like to like decide before the game to make a draw or anything like that. I would usually decide during the game usually at these days.
Interesting.
Because again, it's like all about setting good example for kids, right? I don't want my kids, my students to do that, so I don't really want to do that either. And honestly, these days, like now that I'm more of an active of a coach, I think I'll even like make less of these draws at the end of the tournament, even to clinch something, because honestly, I just want to fight, right? I want to play principled. I don't get a chance to play that much, so I might not even like, be as keen on making these draws, right? I think that my friend is trying to talk me out of it, and I think he's right. So I think going forward, I actually want to become more of a fighting player anyway, because like I feel like me and Magnus are a little bit similar in the sense that we're both like a little bit like adult decliners, right? Like he's still very very strong, of course, right? But like once he realized he can't become 2900, I feel like he's slightly on the decline, right? Like now he's a little bit more accessible, right? I feel like I listened to an interview in Chess Dojo by Hammer, and he said like 10 years ago Magnus would never even consider
Yeah. Yeah. I
think
heard that
about
too. That was good.
like
Yeah.
making offering a draw like that, and now he's willing to. So the point is that I feel like I can relate to all of that, right? Like in the past I would like be much more like uncompromising, and now I'm much more willing to fight, and I feel like that's just honestly a wrong approach. And I think once you start like becoming like that, then you're becoming not adult improver anymore, you're becoming more of an adult decliner. And I definitely want to change that trend, right? And plus I'm setting bad example for kids if I'm doing that. So going forward, I want to just make sure I stop my decline, right? Like I want to not be an adult decliner anymore. Whether I can actually be an adult improver, that's a different story. But at least I
Right.
want to pause
An
my
adult
decline.
stagnator at minimum.
Maybe, yeah, the stagnator.
Yeah. And to highlight what you were saying, yeah, Dojo Talks had an interview with Hammer about all the stuff that went on, and definitely recommend listeners check that out. And there was another point that Jesse Cry highlighted that I thought was incisive, was he mentioned that he thought part of the reason that Magnus, he's very in tune with psychoanalyzing Magnus, Jesse is, and he thought maybe it was a lack of confidence that actually may have contributed to his even giving Nepo a draw. Not just the decline of fighting spirit, but actually like increased fear of losing than he would have had in prior years because he's an adult decliner
Well,
like
yeah,
us.
exactly. And here's also the thing, right? Like when he first made an emotional decision, he said he's gonna pull out of Blitz as well, which he ended up like, like turning, like actually playing the Blitz after all. But originally the plan was he's not gonna play the Blitz, right? And my friend heavily criticized it. He said, okay, he doesn't believe, probably because he deeply doesn't believe he can win anymore. And the problem is like with Magnus' situation, like a lot of the things he says is legitimate, right? But the problem is this whole Neiman situation was just very bad, right? Like he clearly legitimate player, right? And now it makes Magnus look quite bad. So it seems like a lot of the times he gets involved into something is when he doesn't do as well anymore, right? Like Hans, he lost, had a scandal against Suleimanov, he lost, and then he brought up the watch, right? Here he was not doing well, 5 out of 8, didn't have much chances to win the tournament anymore. And then, yeah, he had the scandals. It seems to always be happening when he's not doing well, right? And I feel like that kind of takes away from his capital, right? Because it takes a little bit from his, because like
Credibility. Yeah.
it's like with Kramnik, right? Like when you're starting to, let's say, be suspicious of like many people, then even when you're like legitimate, when there's a suspicion that's actually legitimate, when you're doing it with like too many people, like left and right, then you lose your credibility, right? So I feel like it's a similar thing with Magnus, right? Like when you're doing it too often, it becomes like Boy Who Cried Wolf, right? Like nobody listens to you anymore, right? They assume it's just like being a sore loser or whatever. So even if you do have something legitimate, a legitimate point, it like you already like become less credible. So I think that's important to keep in mind, right? That's why if if you're ever gonna go and like have a principled or some scandal or whatever, you better really, really, really make sure you're right. Like if you're gonna be wrong about it, then that's really gonna damage your reputation, right? So that's why I would never go out like speak public like that or like or whatever, like raise suspicions about people or whatever in public, right? Because what if I'm wrong? I mean,
Yeah.
then that's very damaging to everyone, right? And I know that I could be wrong, right? Even if I'm even if I think that I'm probably right, like I'm not 100% sure, right? Like, of course, I can talk to like people in private, like chess.com or whatever, if I'm like unsure about something, right? If I'm fairly certain, yeah, like to speak in public, yeah, that's to me like unless you're 100% sure you're right and you have like actual 100% proof, that just seems like, a wrong approach, right? And I think it could be damaging, right? If you end up being wrong. I think for a lot of people, when they do something, they forget to consider the possibility that they could be wrong, right? Like for a lot of people, they can't possibly be wrong, right? And I feel like that's a dangerous mindset when you're going into when you're doing something or saying something under the assumption that you cannot possibly be wrong, right? I think that's just very dangerous, and that's sort of like. But I feel like, yeah, on the other hand, like to become a champion, maybe you have to have a little bit like that personality. But on the other hand, like I don't think Vishy Anand is like that at all, right? Like I don't think Gukesh is like that at all, right? I don't think Ding is like that at all, right? So I think you could become great without all that baggage as well, right? So I think that's like a good sign. So
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good point. Well, Alex, thanks for sharing your tournament report. It was awesome to get a glimpse behind the curtain. I wanted to give thanks as always to Patreon subs. John Cassidy, I didn't read his question because it was if you did any special prep for any super GMs you might play, and I think you answered that you didn't do any prep, right?
yeah, like not in advance, of course, right? And super GMs, they can play literally any opening under the sun anyway. So I prepared for Tang in the first game of the Rapid because I wanted to start off well and he was predictable. That was probably the game I did the most prep in the whole tournament. But
Okay.
other than that, but I guess, I don't know. I guess Tang, you can consider him a super GM and Bullet, but
Right.
otherwise he's a good GM, but maybe, not super GM. But anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Alex, if anyone's looking for lessons, are you taking one-on-one students or?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You can email me at alexlenderman33@hotmail.com and discuss details. These days, I'm mostly taking younger students. I don't take that much adult students, but yes, but kids definitely still taking some students. So be happy to get in touch with me. Even if you're an adult and you're looking for advice, feel free to reach out and I can potentially recommend you some. I know a lot of great coaches who I have a good friend who actually is an adult improver, and I think once he becomes an IM, I'll probably recommend him to get on your
Okay,
podcast
great.
as well. But I'll keep the secret for now who he is. But some people might already have a guess, but I will only mention once he becomes an IM.
Awesome. All right, something to look forward to. Well, thanks again, Alex. Until next time, and congrats again on a great tournament. It's great to see that you still got it.
Thank you so much, Ben. Thanks for having me again. It's
Sure.
great talking to you.